We will use a koan. It's number 2 from the Mumon Kan. The book in front of me is Shibayama's book, Comments on the Mumon Kan. It's number 2. The name of it is Hyakujo and a Fox. And the koan, if one were to summarize it, is about the concept of causation, falling into causation or not falling into causation, cause and effect, and also retribution, rebirth. We'll read it and then comment on it. Sometimes a word may be omitted or a sentence. Whenever Master Hyakujo, he lived in the 8th century in China, whenever Master Hyakujo gave Teisho on Zen, gave a talk on Zen, an old man sat with the monks to listen and always withdrew when they did. One day, however, he remained behind, and the master asked, "Who are you standing here before me?" And the old man replied, "I'm not a human being. In the past, I was the head of this monastery, in the way distant past. Once a monk asked me, 'Does an enlightened man also fall into causation or not?' And I replied, 'He does not.' Because of this, I was made to live as a fox for 500 lives. Now I beg you, please say the turning words on my behalf and release me from the fox body." The old man then asked Hyakujo, "Does an enlightened man also fall into causation or not?" The master said, "He does not ignore causation. He does not ignore causation." Hearing this, the old man was at once enlightened. Making a bow to Hyakujo, he said, "I have now been released from the fox body, which will be found behind the mountain. I dare to make a request of the master. Please bury it as you would a deceased monk." The master had the head monk strike the gavel and announce to the monks that there would be a funeral for a deceased monk after the midday meal. The monks wondered, saying, "We're all in good health. There's no sick monk in the Nirvana Hall." Nirvana Hall is the sick room. What is it all about? What is it all about? After the meal, the master led the monks to a rock behind the mountain, poked out a dead fox with his staff, and cremated it. In the evening, the master ascended the rostrum in the hall and told the monks the whole story, which incidentally, very likely he had made up. Obaku thereupon, Obaku was the head monk. His Chinese name is Wangpo. We read often from him. Obaku thereupon asked, "The old man failed to give the correct words and was made to live as a fox for 500 lives, you say? If, however, his answer had not been incorrect each time, or had been correct, what would he have become?" The master said, "Come closer to me and I'll tell you." Obaku then stepped forward to Hyakujo and slapped him. Obaku stepped forward to Hyakujo and slapped him. The master laughed aloud, clapping his hands, and said, "I thought a foreigner's beard is red, but I see that it's a foreigner with a red beard." And the commentary of the compiler of this collection, Mumon, not falling into causation. Why was he turned into a fox? Not ignoring causation. Why was he released from the fox body? You have an eye to see. If you have an eye to see through this, then you will know that the former head of the monastery did enjoy his 500 happy, blessed lives as a fox. In the poem, not falling, not ignoring, odd and even are on one die. Die, this thing that you shoot, crap. Not falling, not ignoring, two faces, one die is another translation. Not ignoring, not falling, hundreds and thousands of regrets. Extending this comment that this story was either made up by Hyakujo or was an existent story is not my personal commentary only. I've read this several places. Obviously, this is not a real story. It's a real story. The scene is set whenever Hyakujo gives a talk. There's an old man who's just there listening. One time he stays behind and he's asked, "Who are you?" He says, "I'm not a human being." And he tells a story how he was made into a fox. Someone had come to his monastery and asked, "Does an enlightened man also fall into causation or not?" And he answered this question immediately, it seems, by saying, no, he doesn't. Let's just stop with this brief exchange and look at it. Someone going to the abbot of a monastery and asking, does an enlightened person also fall under causation? If you were asked that, somebody asked you that, how would you respond? How would you listen to this? Would it immediately bring up the issue and you give some kind of an answer from what you have heard or read or think you know? Or would you want to know much more about the questioner? Or is the questioner revealed in the question? Why does a person ask a question like that? Could you see yourself asking this question? It may not be your vocabulary falling into causation. It may not be familiar words, familiar concept. Often in Buddhist terminology, causation is also the law of birth and death, being born and dying and all that comes in between, before and after. Can I be free from that under any circumstances? If I get enlightenment, whatever it may take or involve, will I be free from maybe not so much being born, but dying? Am I afraid of dying? Maybe not of dying, but of pain, sorrow, difficulty, my whole life. And is there a state of being in which I won't have to deal with all these problems anymore, in which they will be solved, resolved, disappear, never to come back again? I've heard a lot about enlightenment. Doesn't enlightenment still have to deal with all the causes and effects of everyday life, including death? Is fear motivating the question? Fear of all of that? Fear of the idea of all of that? Or am I in the midst of this and just want to be done with it, run away from it? Have some hope for the future in which I will be enlightened, in which this all will be settled for me? This abbot who is being asked this question, does he see the man? Does he listen to him? Or ask him further? What do you mean? What's on your mind, really, underneath this question? Can we touch it? Can we look at it? Explore it together? Because I don't know either. Well, we'll start from that. Here the answer is, he does not. The enlightenment doesn't fall under causation anymore. Maybe this is what the man wanted to hear. But regardless of what the man wanted to hear, although this may have been an influence on the abbot, sensing what the man wants to hear and giving him what he wants. A comforting goal of enlightenment in which there is no longer the burden, the retribution, the causation, and the effects of my actions or my previous actions. It's an absurd thing. It's not thought through at all, but the answer is given, and usually when we're given an answer which is of this kind, there may be relief. All right, so there is still some hope. We don't have to give up. I'll attain something sometime in the future. In this story, because of this answer, the abbot was made to live as a fox for 500 lives. Was made implying some agency, not a deity, but this law of cause and effect itself is understood popularly in Buddhism as a force, like the force of gravity. If one doesn't understand directly what's going on, one uses concepts, and the concept becomes an entity. The law of cause and effect made him turn into a fox. A fox is a symbol in many countries, and I was told also in Japan and in China, for cleverness, caginess, trickiness with words, the clever use of words. Often in Zen, the fox spirit is said that this person is speaking with a fox spirit, meaning knowing how to use words very well, eruditely, cleverly, but not understanding profoundly beyond the words or underneath the words, beyond the words, without the words. So one wonders, this man said this, and this way of speaking from knowledge, from ideas of what enlightenment is the fox spirit. So he wasn't turned into anything, he was that. And as long as one lives on ideas and concepts that one cherishes, that one believes in, or that one isn't even aware of as being concepts, it's all one knows, then there is this fox spirit, if you want to give another label to it. One doesn't need to be turned into anything, one is that. And it continues until there is a change, an understanding. Incidentally, just to give an example of a verbalization of what an enlightened person is, let me read you here in this book about Shibayama here speaks about the man of real freedom, which is another way of referring to the enlightened man. And this is something that the abbot may have read or been taught by his teacher. The man of real freedom would be the one who lives in peace in whatever circumstances cause and effect bring about. Whether the situation be favorable or adverse, he lives it as the absolute situation with his whole being. That is, he is causation itself. He never dualistically discriminates different aspects of the situation. His heart is never disturbed by any outside elements. When he lives like this, he is the master of cause and effect, and everything is blessed as it is. The eternal peace is established here. This is the indescribable spiritual happiness a Zen man enjoys. We've all read things like this, and immediately one wants that, or wonders whether one can attain to that. Or one has worked at this thing for a number of years, one despairs of ever getting there. Why do we have to set up this discrimination in the first place between the enlightened man and the rest of us? It's what we do. It's an ingrained, deep-seated, age-old, eon-old habit to set up categories of people, which often are the enlightened and the unenlightened, the rich and the poor. Of course, there are rich and poor people. But let's stay with enlightened and the rest. Why set up this category? Do you see the danger of it, the harm it does? For those who put themselves into the category or are put by someone, and those who are not. How can one say anything about anybody? We're all changing. We're never fixed. Ideas are fixed. That's the only thing that's fixed in this world, are ideas. So someone coming to you as an abbot saying, does the enlightened man, blah, blah, blah. Why not immediately question, what do you mean by that? What is that? What's your idea about it? And do you realize it's an idea? A goal? A hope? What are you now? What am I now? It's important to see, totally important to see this instant, without any distraction about maybe becoming an enlightened or a fully enlightened person at some future time, which is the separation from this instant and the conflict with this instant. but thinking constantly establishes categories. We want to be something. Feel accepted, belonging, secure in some kind of an identity. Either we have it or we want to attain it. Having been on vacation the last few weeks and listening to news daily, so much happened. And this constant referral over the news of we have to save American lives, this utter importance and seriousness of this goal, this motive to save American lives, to justify any kind of action. American lives. It's almost as though it's a holy thing to save lives, because the others want to save Russian or Cuban lives, and so to save all these lives we're killing each other. Saw some of the Americans who came back were, as it said, rescued from the small island, say that they were proud to be Americans. To be American, one was an American, and therefore one was saved by someone coming out of the air. If you hadn't been an American, you wouldn't have been saved. You would have been left behind. So it was a very practical and helpful and safe thing to be an American. This is how we identify with groups, with nationality, with religion, because there is some safety in it. May not always work, but we hope it will work, at least for me. To save American lives are also lost. But that is also justified because these people are peacemakers. It's a new category, a new name for soldiers is peacemakers. I heard a Marine memorial service where the chaplain said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, because they will be the sons of God." Names, labels, categories, identities in which we find some meaning in our otherwise so seemingly meaningless life. And with finding our identity, our belonging, our group, the separation starts and the conflict with others starts and continues as long as we hold on to that. Do you see that? And in seeing it, can the identity be dropped? Does one cease seeing oneself as this or that because of what it does to all humanity, perpetuating strife, conflict, and war? I want to come back to this question of the monk, does the enlightened man fall under causation? We touched upon it before. Could there have been fear of dying and wanting to be free of that, having heard there is such a state as nirvana in which there is neither birth nor death, but eternal bliss? And hearing that there is such a state in which causation doesn't work, and believing in that, and the belief giving energy, comfort, enthusiasm, or inspiration, in which one can better maybe cope or ignore one's problems. I may be reborn as a fox, but at least there is rebirth as something. This life won't come to an end when this body dies. And rather than being with the fear as it crops up during the day or night in the course of the day, the week, the year, to see it, to be with it, to touch it, to understand it, observe it as it works, how it affects one, how it may cause irritation or affects relationship, to rather believe in something, so I don't have to deal with that. And the belief, I can regenerate it. I can read about it or listen to wherever it's talked about and get new inspiration, so I don't have to face. Just last night read a letter from someone. I'll read parts of this letter, leaving out the name, substituting a different name, and I'm sure this person wouldn't mind if this letter is used here, because it deals with death and the fear of dying. And it is so universally applicable. He says, I've been on quite a journey. February retreat started it all with a real honest looking at what my life, in quotation marks, is composed of. The whole tangle. The following week, my dad called with the news that my mom had a brain tumor and was about to be operated on. Thus began a 5-month journey for the whole family, but especially for my father and myself, including hospitals and tests and treatments and an operation, and finally terminal cancer. Mom passed on in late July. I was fortunate enough to be an intimate part of the whole process, including being with and caring for Mom in her last few weeks. The amounts of stuff this has all brought up are beyond words. I would like to share and look at a couple of things with you. Tremendous grief, fear of loss, of dying, being swept away, losing everything, all of nature's creatures eating and being eaten. It's all very well to espouse the Buddhist sense of impermanence and change, but this deep, deep fear and grief is still there. The belief just covers it up a little bit. As I entered into this, it was obviously far beyond the personal loss of, quote, my mother, unquote. There was and is a tremendous sense of the great suffering of all us individuals being born, forging a life, and then having everything taken away, either slowly or quickly. The overwhelming mass of suffering of millions and millions of people. So what about this suffering that seems to be such a part of human existence? I think I've often tried to use spiritual practice, in quotation marks, as a way to get out of it, beat the system, to transcend, in quotation marks. Through this time, the image of Christ in the garden has kept coming up. He could have gotten away from his tormentors, started a revolution, but he just stayed there, surrendered all the way to the cross. During this time, there have been moments of not fighting, of just being this mass of feeling, of not even looking at the mind state in order to get rid of it. At these moments, the tenderness, the opening, the letting go, there is something to this fathomless pool of suffering that creates compassion, opens the door to love and oneness. It can't be explained. This leads to the other question of death itself. Who dies? I was with Mom as she faced up to it and seemed to really let go. Death has been a tender and frightening companion for months now, and I thought I was comfortable with the illusion of death, in quotation marks. It seems that everyone I know is sure about rebirth and reincarnation. It is a given. You don't even have to argue about it. It is assumed that everyone in the room has a common understanding of it. Talk of past and future lives, sprinkle conversations and restaurants and at parties. So this context mixed in with your encouragement to question really pushes the question for me. Who is this personal Fred? We've talked about this before, and I want to look at it more. This Fred, this personality, these tendencies, these conditioned fears. It is clear that the me who sees it is not just this Fred. It isn't when there's no wanting to get rid of, no judging. When there is this, what he described, this just being this mass of whatever there is. With an awareness, not sleeping, but an awareness, which is non-judgmental. If a judgment comes up, let it light up in this awareness, and it cannot continue. So he says here, it is clear that the me who sees is not just this Fred. It isn't the me that sees. If it's the me, then it is judgmental, wanting something, gross or subtle, wanting to transcend, wanting to be one, wanting to be this mass of feeling. Can this wanting light up in awareness? Not literally. Just the awareness and the wanting or the fearing not being two. It happens to a mind that doesn't know, and yet needs to question, needs to be exposed, in touch. Yet it is through these eyes and hands that seeing is manifested. Fred is very specific and very personal. Being a good Buddhist, I've put in a lot of effort through the years to transcend monkey Fred, to be the great emptiness, the vast undifferentiated. What a dry and lifeless void. It seems that when there's just being with humble Fred, his little fears and hopes and dreams, his tears, his suffering, then the whole of creation tenderly unfolds. We're all one family. It is when I'm not trying to transcend the personal, when I'm just being what I am and not trying to fix it, that the whole opens up and the hard separation melts away. Birth and death or causation, the law of cause and effect, these are all concepts. These are all ideas. Actually, when there's the openness of observation, of attention, there's just one process which unfolds or changes constantly. Where is the cause and where is the effect? Right now, if you look at a branch, the leaves have dropped, there's already a little bud. What caused that? The dropping leaf or the dropping fruit? How can you fix it? The tree? The seed from which the tree grew? And what caused that to sprout? It doesn't sprout on its own. There's earth, sunshine, rain, altitude, whatever. These little new sprouts, in the spring they open up, and there's a leaf, there's a flower, there's a fruit, then the dropping and the new bud. What causes it? How can you fix it? Why do you want to fix it? Often when we struggle with a problem, because of our training, because of our past experiences and our habits, it somehow is comforting to be told a cause. We ask for it. We've been trained this way. Why is this so? And someone gives a quick answer, or we ourselves give a quick answer, and for a moment there is a relief just because an answer has been given and nothing has been understood. We think we understand because we're trained to think that words and explanations are understanding. But they keep us out of touch with what is really there. Not that they don't have their usefulness, but we have to understand when they're useful and when they're dividing and separating and throwing a screen in between. If something doesn't go right with the children, we want a cause. Why is it so? And if somebody gives a cause, you're too lenient or you're too strict, you give too much attention or you don't give enough attention, we may follow the advice and give more attention or establish more limits, and thinking that this cause will have an effect. It may not at all. What we need to do is to observe. To observe the trees and the branches and ourselves and the children, the people around us, with no idea, not knowing, and therefore in touch. If you observe children and you have time, most of the time we don't have time, it reveals itself what is going on. And out of this observation comes right action, or one makes mistakes, but one sees it immediately. Try to observe, to become aware how strongly we think in terms of cause and effect, which has been very helpful in technology. But in human relations it is not helpful. Observation, looking, observing, watching over, not just once and then I haven't seen anything, but as you go, as we go. Also, what usually happens if we are given an explanation a cause for something, or we give it ourselves, at that moment we stop. The thing is settled for the moment. It is not settled, but we think it is. This is what is the effect of an instant answer. We drop the question and the problem. It comes back, it's there. And then we look for another explanation or for another cause. On the verbal level, or do we see that what we label the cause and think the effect will be may have nothing, and most of the time has very little to do with what is actually going on? This old man asks the teacher, the master, does an enlightened man fall under cause and effect, or doesn't he? This question could also mean, can an enlightened man do as he or she pleases and no more effects? It may seem ridiculous, a ridiculous question, but it is in the mind. If I have this enlightenment, then can I do anything? Will have no longer any effects, bad effects, on me or others? Such magical thinking. Can't be answered by anyone, and it needs to be observed. What happens when I do this within me and around me? Yakujo says he does not ignore causation. He uses this terminology, but not ignoring is the important point. Not ignoring, not turning away, not looking the other way, but attending. Do we attend when someone talks to us? May not talk in a friendly way. Person may be very insulting, hurting our image, because this is what hurts. It's the image, if you look at it. Is there this not ignoring, this broad, open, light listening? In that case, the offense doesn't even become a cause, because there's no effect. In such listening, there is no hurt. And if there's hurt, if it's listened to, it wipes away very quickly. So being called a bad name does not become cause for a hurt. In listening, in attending, widely, broadly, not just me and my image. And then there is no thought of retaliation, of retribution. There's another thing that popped up time and again over the news during the past weeks. We must get revenge. We must retaliate. We must punish the perpetrator. The perpetrator is already dead. The man drove the truck and exploded himself. But we must get to the source and retaliate. It's such limited thinking. Why did this take place? This was already an effect of a previous cause. Everybody thinks they are retaliating for something suffered. And retaliating, the retaliation just keeps this chain moving endlessly. Where is it going to stop? Who is going to stop it? Not idealistically say, I will not retaliate, but seeing the whole thing, and with the seeing it stops. It can't go on. When retaliation goes on, it breeds retaliation. And where is the initial cause? We can never find it. Historically, it goes back as far as we know history. Someone attacking someone else, but the attacker also being a victim of something. Selfishness, ego, is that a cause or is that an effect? It's both. The effect of ego will always be ego. It cannot be any different. A selfish act breeds more selfish action. So we're trying to say that a fox is a fox, whether it's an animal or a fox spirit in a human being. Selfish action can never breed anything but that. It's only when it ends that something new can take place. You say, well, does this mean this is the freedom from cause and effect? This is, again, intellectualizing about it. And will this last? Will this be forever? Like some of these lines we were reading, it sounds as though once you have that, you'll have it forever. This is an idea, a wishful thinking, which blots out and subdues attention. Attention needs to be there from moment to moment, to see whether it's gone or whether it's there. If there's attention, it's clear whether there's self or whether there's not self. Not ignoring is the same as attending. Where does this energy come from? Not to ignore, because our momentum, our push and pull is to ignore and be comfortable with what is, which is usually ideas about ourselves and the world, our hopes for the world, hopes for ourselves, and to see the fear that holds on to hopes, not to ignore it. Yakuja says he does not ignore, and it says the old man was instantly enlightened. Was instantly understood what this is all about. Which is the end at that instant of the fox. Whether it'll come up the next moment, see it. Watch it. And is the watching, the me watching, I must watch now so I can keep this thing going? That's not watching, that's more me wanting, holding on, attaching to a memory of a past moment of release. Do you see that? And in this seeing, can the memory drop? Because it's just a memory? or at least be seen for that and therefore have no hold, rather facing the queasiness or dis-ease or discomfort that may come with seeing one has nothing to hold on to. Facing that completely, humbly, as this man wrote. Humbly meaning no images about my accomplishment, my power, my attention. Whose? In this koan, one person picks up another thought. In the front of all the assembled people says, well, what if the man had answered properly? He'd given the right answer, whatever that is. Would he have then become, in one translation it said, would become an arhat, which is a saint, and then a bodhisattva, which is a near Buddha, and then a Buddha, and then what would he have become? Because after all, for giving the wrong answer, he became a fox. So if he gives the right answer, this is how we think. If we do wrong, we're punished. If we do right, we're rewarded. In this case, the punishment is the development into a lower state of existence, whatever that means, lower. Just yesterday, walking in the park, we saw a fox. I've never seen a fox in this park. It just dashed out